Welcome to episode 101 of the Forward from 50 podcast, where we interview people over 50 who are pursuing new direction for their lives. It's an opportunity for men and women to tell their stories their way and in their own words. I'm Greg Gerber, the founder of Forward from 50, and your host for today's show. Today we have an incredible conversation with Steve Woodruff, who is also known as the King of Clarity. Steve has spent decades helping businesses and individuals to sharpen their messaging and ensuring they communicate with precision and impact. Now in his 60s, Steve's focusing more on guiding people through personal branding and helping them to craft what he calls memory darts. Those are short, intriguing statements that spark curiosity and make you unforgettable. Steve also describes how he and his wife ensure they grow closer every day through better conversations. Whether you're navigating a career transition, trying to be more memorable when meeting new people, or simply looking for more meaningful ways to communicate, this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. So please welcome Steve Woodruff, the King of Clarity, to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Steve. I really appreciate your time. You are involved in coaching business owners now that you're over 50 into having more clarity with their communication messages. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a universal need, Greg. Every one of us has to answer the question, what do you do? And turns out that a lot of people don't know how to answer that question really well. You come out with a kind of a flat answer, I'm a VP of HR or something like that, or some kind of long elevator pitch, putting people to sleep. And so what I help people do is develop what I call a memory dart. Nice and short, 15 to 30 seconds, intriguing, vivid, sticks in the memory. And it's the best way to get a good conversation going.
And that would be helpful not just for businesses, but for anybody that we're meeting,
Correct.
right? So when we're meeting somebody new for the first time, you want them to remember you, or you can create a memory dart, I would imagine, so that you could remember that person too.
That's correct. In fact, you and I were together at a conference last week of a bunch of entrepreneurs, and I thought of a new memory dart for myself because I've got a bunch of them. And this one was real easy. If somebody says, Steve, what do you do? I say, I help people answer that very question, not with a boring elevator pitch, but with something much more effective, a memory dart. And then they have to ask the question, what do you mean by that? And that opens the door to a good conversation.
I like how memory darts are not about telling and selling, but more about sparking curiosity to initiate that conversation. Otherwise, it's too easy to say, oh, that's nice, and move on. But by introducing that curiosity, you spark a conversation that is far more memorable.
I had an incredible and unexpected example of this happen just in the last couple of days. I was speaking with my youngest son, he's what's called a documentation specialist. What a terrible title, right? But he went to school to learn drone piloting, and he got a job doing photography and drone photography for a company that documents the progress of buildings and constructions. They go and take a series of photos, and some of it uses a drone. So he and I were on the phone, and he said, yeah, I've just got this crazy title, documentation specialist. I said, well, let's come up with a memory dart for you. So what we came up with is I get paid to fly drones and take pictures. And then shortly after we got off the phone, he got pulled over because he had a brake light out.
Oops.
And the police was asking about who he is, and he decided to try it. And he said to the policeman, I get paid to fly drones. And he said, it opened up this conversation.
How cool is that?
Even if you get pulled over to be arrested, you can at least network effectively.
How did you get involved in this, or when did you decide to pursue this avenue?
I've always had a heart for marketing and branding and messaging. I didn't even before I even knew what those things were, there was something in my makeup. I loved to play with words. And then when I started getting into the professional world and selling and then marketing, you have to package words to be effective. I would keep working on messaging, and then that goes into presentations, that goes into when you're doing a class. Everything has to be packaged in a way that secures attention and keeps people's interest.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that stuck with me most is everybody knows that the best way to gain new business is referrals. or to make new friends, referrals. But how do people refer you? They only refer you by what little bit they remember of something of you. So we should plant that little bit in their head in the most accurate, vivid, memorable way possible. So one of the nicknames I go by, someone gave this to me and I just adopted it, is King of Clarity. You only meet one King of Clarity. That's me.
Okay.
And it sticks. And even if you don't understand everything, when you're talking to someone and they say, man, my message isn't clear and I don't know what I'm doing. And then you think, oh, I know, you need the King of Clarity. That's why a memory dart is so powerful. You can be referred because you've occupied the right pigeonhole in people's mind.
That's right. And again, it's not just for work. It can be anything that you're doing, any social clubs that you're involved in. Whatever you like to do, incorporate that into the memory dart that is then associated with your identity. That's a brilliant
correct
strategy.
My wife's memory dart is she's the combobulator. And we came to this because I've always loved the word discombobulation. I think it's a great word. It's fun. And at some point, I thought there must be a word called combobulation. If you can have a discombobulate, there must be combobulate. So I looked it up, and sure enough, it means exactly what you would think it would mean, organizing things. And in fact, my favorite place in any United States airport is in Milwaukee. They have this big sign when you get your luggage, and over here it's the recombobulation area. Get all your stuff together here. So I said to my wife, you are the combobulator. You're the one that comes in, and her whole wiring and DNA, this isn't just a job. This is just who she is. She organizes everything. And so sometimes she'll tell somebody, I'm the combobulator. And of course they have to say, what's that? And then she's become memorable for this attribute of hers.
Exactly. I love that. There are a lot of people out there who are organizers, and we're going through and helping people to simplify or declutter, but it is something rather unique, and it would be very memorable.
Yeah, it's a twist. It's a hook. It's sticky. And turns out we have so much competition. We have so much tsunami of input coming that unless we learn to be sticky, we're just going to blend into the background.
Too many times I would imagine we are spilling everything up front. When somebody asks, what do? You launch into a pre-recorded speech about the things that you do that involve basically your work or how you identified yourself as work, where you're from, etc. But this is a more organized approach, isn't it?
Yeah. My whole approach to my workshops and everything I do is all about clarity of communication, clarity and brevity. And the fact is, the biggest enemy to that is what we all call TMI, too much information. So when we overwhelm people with too much information, the brain shuts down. What we have to do is, instead of dumping an entire haystack on people, we take the needle out of the haystack and say, this is the point. And they go, okay. So one of the rules about the way the human brain works is if you overwhelm the brain with too much, you lose it. And that's why you have to start with something small and intriguing and vivid so that you actually land the message instead of just dumping stuff.
It's like fishing with a fish and a hook, right? You have to have the bait on the end that is going to attract the specific fish, and you have to move it around a little bit to generate interest. Because if you just throw all the food in the water, you're not going to catch any fish.
That's right. You'll see over my shoulder, I have a little stuffed penguin up on my bookcase. And I use that penguin to illustrate the fact that we've all seen the nature shows where you have this big ice floe and there are all these penguins on it. And they look the same. They sound the same. They're all just penguins. And the fact is that we're all just another penguin until we find a way to be different. And so it's important for us to understand our wiring, our unique strengths, our characteristics, and then wrap that in a message so that we're not just another background penguin. We're someone unique and valuable and memorable. And one of my specialties is digging into people's souls and minds and backgrounds and figuring out what makes them unique, then turn that into a message.
Wow. Do you do this for anybody, or is this a career that you've just picked up after you turned 50?
No, I've been doing this for decades.
Okay.
I developed this doing branding for small companies, and I realized it's exactly the same process for individuals.
Correct.
We have the same need to stand out. And so I've worked with countless individuals and consultants and startups and people trying to figure out, what am I all about? What's my direction? What's my differentiator? And then how do I say it? And I knew that as I got older, this would be my non-retirement. I would work less with big corporations because I do workshops with communication with corporations. But I've always felt like my major thing is helping individuals figure themselves out and get their message.
That's neat. What's the name of your company?
So up until about 2 weeks ago, it was Impactivity. I've just reorganized the company into a S Corp here in Tennessee. The new name of the company is Clarity Fuel. And I have actually been using that name for quite some time as well. I knew I was going to eventually transition the company to Clarity Fuel. And so I just went through all the paperwork process with the accountant and got all that done recently. And that's Impactivity is a little bit of an ambiguous name.
Right.
Clarity Fuel talks about clarity, and that's what I'm all about.
It sounds like you're living what you're preaching to everybody else.
I have
preaching. So wait, you wrote a couple of books as well. When did you start writing?
I've been writing unofficially for I don't know how long, many years, decades really. And I've also done a lot of blogging ever since I started my own company about 20 years ago. So the writing of my ideas has been part of me for a long time. And I even knew back in my 20s that I was going to write books. But it took me into my 60s before I actually started to do it. And so I've written 2 books on the topic of clarity. One in 2018 called Clarity Wins, which is a lot of my thoughts about memory darts and being referral ready and being able to distinguish yourself and your message. And then a year and a half ago, I released a book called The Point, which is actually a universal formula for all clear communications. Every means, every human being, it's human communication, 4 rules, 8 tools. Anybody can apply it to be a great communicator.
So again, it's not just business, but it's communication, communicating within families, communicating within friendships, any organizations that we might be involved in. We could all benefit from more clear communication.
Yeah, it's an absolutely human, universal, all-time need. Generations of humans have needed to. And then the principles I work from, they're not like, I'm not a rocket scientist. These have been the things that we've known for decades and centuries and generations are what goes into clear communications. We know stories stick with people. We know little snippets. We know that illustrations work. We know that parables work. We know that what I call memory darts. Mm-hmm. This is how we've seen people communicate from biblical times and every civilization. It's all the same rules. Because we're all human, we have a brain, and we react to words in a very predictable way.
That's absolutely true. How is AI influencing all of this? Because communication is so important, and now we're inviting computers into the conversation. Is that an effective way to do this or not?
I believe that the human layer of creativity, practicality, empathy, experience has to be primary. AI can help generate content. It can organize stuff. It's not bad at what it does, but it doesn't replace the ability of a human being to creatively and imaginatively put things into words. I don't diss AI. It's a great tool, but it's not a human being. It is not a creative consultant. It is not a maker of memory darts. So it's got its limits.
Okay. So if I were to enter all of the things I did and ask it to clarify that, it might do a good job, but it's not quite creating a memory dart. That is more specific.
It'll do a pretty good job. I've actually used it. So I have an article, which I forwarded to you actually, and this article, somebody in a very short time frame said, hey, we had an author drop out. We need an article for this magazine. Can you generate one? I had put all of my books and stuff into ChatGPT. And I said, write me a 1,000-word article on the advantages of memory dart versus elevator pitch in the tone of Steve Woodruff. And you know what? It actually did a really good job. But it was using my raw material. It really did package my thoughts well. And then I went through it and edited it and made it even better.
Mhm.
There's some good stuff there, but it doesn't replace human creativity.
You did not start your career in sales and marketing. I understand you actually started in astronomy of all things. Why did you start there? That's so unusual.
I actually my first aspiration was to be an astronaut. I wanted to be an astronaut. I love all things space. I loved science fiction as a kid, but I had bad eyesight as a child. And back in those days, they couldn't correct them in such a way for the pilots and astronauts had to have great vision. So that door was shut right away. But I also loved astronomy. And so I thought, okay, I'm a big fan of space. I'll go into astronomy. But I didn't realize is that 99% of astronomy is physics and calculus. It's not just looking through the telescope and saying, wow, this is cool. I don't like physics and calculus. So I went to college and I took in my first year physics and calculus, which was lined up for an astronomy major. And I suddenly realized, you know what? This isn't for me. I'm not a numbers guy. I'm an idea guy. I'm a words guy. So I still love space. I still would love to go on a trip to Saturn, but I have to keep all that in the background and deal with the practicality of what I can do.
Have you joined the waiting list to get on one of these SpaceX expeditions into space?
I don't have that much. But man, I would love to do it.
I know there are a lot of astronomical events coming up this year. I think there's like a 5 or 7 planet alignment this summer that's going to be really cool. Do you still have the ability to look at the stars?
No, I used to have a telescope when I was young, growing up as a teenager, and I loved it. But I haven't lived in a dark sky area for a long time. And that's the problem is
Right.
if you're not living in a dark sky area, there's just only so much you can see.
Mhm.
And then you've got the phases of the moon, and then you've got clouds. And it turns out the number of times you can actually go out and have productive times with a telescope are relatively small. I still want to live in a dark sky area, and I would love to have a scope again. And especially as our grandchildren grow up, I would love to turn them on to astronomy that way.
Arizona is great for dark sky in some areas.
I
Not
know that.
necessarily in Phoenix, but so is New
No,
Mexico.
I wouldn't do it in Phoenix.
Exactly. I understand that you've been married 42 years. That's unreal in today's environment.
Yep, actually 43 and a half.
40. Oh,
Yeah, we got married young. We were 4 and 5 years old. No, actually, we're adults. But yeah, we met each other during college years, and we started out as friends.
mhm.
And we determined that we were going to have a godly and close friendship relationship first. But as these things develop, we got a whole lot more interested in each other. Sandy and I got married when we both finished college, and we have been on this adventure ever since. We now have 5 grown adult boys, young men. And the interesting thing is that she and I both were college graduates. We both did graduate work. She has a master's in education. But only one of our kids graduated from college. The
Wow.
others wanted to work with their hands, their minds, not necessarily needing a college education. And we wanted them to be able to be free to do that. So one is a carpenter, one is a documentation specialist. He gets paid to fly drones. Another does private security, another's in the HVAC industry, and another is a whiskey brand ambassador and influencer living in the dark sky country of Wyoming.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, we've got this spread of different interests and skills among our kids, and it's really a blast. When you have older kids, you can start strategizing about business and marketing, and it's no longer just obey mom and dad. It's all right, let's take over the world together.
Right. That's good. It goes beyond friendship and
Oh yeah.
to and genuine partnership. Oh, a lot of problems occur for people over 50 with their relationships in that they get to a point where the empty nest occurs. Everybody leaves the house and they realize there are 2 strangers left behind. What do you and your wife do to maintain that strong relationship? Or what advice would you have to other people who are in their 50s who are approaching that empty nest and the problems that might occur with it?
Yeah, we're relatively recent empty nesters, only in the last couple years. And as that time approached, Sandy and I have always been very good friends and teammates, as well as husband and wife. But we realized over time there'd been some decay in the closeness that we had. So one of the most effective things we've done recently is we deliberately meet almost every afternoon at 4 o'clock for tea. And we talk through how the day's been, but we put limits on how much work talk is there because sometimes that can dominate too much. And then one of the things we've done recently, which is really fun, is we downloaded this box of cards. It was on Amazon. It's called Conversation Something. And it's a whole bunch of questions that you can use for conversation starters. And so we turned to the questions, and it stirs up all kinds of interesting new discussions that we wouldn't necessarily have thought to have. So one of the questions recently was, what would be the one experience you really want to have before you die? And I didn't hesitate one bit. I said, I want to be down where some big rocket's getting launched, and I want to see and feel or hear the power of a mega rocket. I've always wanted to do that. And so at least that one, I'm not going to Saturn, but maybe I can get that.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I love that idea of a conversation card to take you off the path into areas that you might not know about each other. And it keeps the relationship alive, I would think.
It does. It helps keep it fresh because there's only so much you can think of on any given day. And these cards come at things with different angles and sometimes really make you think. I mean, there have been some times when Sandy will read a question from one of those cards and I'm dumbfounded for 30 or 40 seconds. I don't even know what to say because I never thought of that angle. So it ends up being a great way to just keep the conversation flow going.
I absolutely love that you set an appointment to meet with each other every day for tea. How long have you been doing that?
That has only been the last few months.
Okay.
We floundered around for a while trying to figure out how to do this empty nest thing. And we realized that we probably would do better with a format, just the way we are. So not everybody can do format. Some people have to be more spontaneous. But for us at this time, a format was really helpful. And so we've just gone with it.
Okay. And you got these cards on Amazon and you use that to help with the conversations. Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. There's a plethora of different conversation ones. And we found that this particular one, I don't remember the name of it, but it was Conversation Something. And it has 3 different categories of more generality than going into deeper levels of intimacy. And it's really fun.
Do you have any plans in retirement for the two of you you're not technically retired, but now that you're older and empty nesters, to do things together?
Yeah, my wife is finishing her last year teaching. So because I've been a solopreneur, we've needed the benefits from her job as a public school teacher until she was 65. So she's just turned 65. I'm 66. So we can now shift over to Medicare and have the health plan that way, which now will allow her to retire. And then we'll do more traveling together. And my work is portable. I can do what I do anywhere. A lot of my sessions are virtual. I do a lot virtual with people. I do 1-hour memory dart sessions with individuals all over the place. But as our kids are scattering, now we'll do more traveling. So we took a 3-week trip last summer, driving up to Wyoming through some states we'd never been through, hanging out for a week in Wyoming with my son, and then driving down through some other states we'd never been through, back to home. That was the first time we've done a trip that long, and it was a blast.
I can imagine. Do you have anything on your bucket list to do other states to visit?
I've always wanted to go to Hawaii. Been there. We've seen a lot of different parts of California, and California is a wonderful place to visit. But one of the things we want to do is spend some time in Europe, because we've had very little overseas time. And that's something we'd really like to do. And then one of our favorite places to visit is upstate New York in the Adirondacks, because we met in Lake Placid, New York, when the summer before the 1980 Winter Olympics. And I just love the Adirondacks. There's something about those mountains and that particular belt of pines and white birches, and I just love it up there.
Is that the Finger Lakes as well? Or is that a
Finger
little?
different part of New
Okay.
York. That's further west. That's also an interesting area. My brothers and I have gone there my three brothers and I have a annual retreat where we get together for a week now that our kids are older, and we've been doing this for 15 years. And we go to all kinds of different places and just stay for a week and cook and play tennis and play cards and have a good time. And a couple of those weeks we went up into the Finger Lakes. It was fun.
That's neat. Are you still working full time, or have you scaled things back?
I'm still full-time employed-ish, although I don't really end up working 40 hours a week. And so some of my revenue is workshops that I do for pharmaceutical companies where I have deep roots in biopharma. And then I do this individual stuff. So it's a little more of a free-flowing lifestyle business at this point. And I don't intend to ever stop. My goal is to continue to help people gain clarity until I drop dead somewhere. But it's a little slower now than it used to be, and I'm okay with that.
The need for meaningful purpose is so essential to people when they're older in their senior years, et cetera. So it's neat that you're continuing to pursue that.
I think, Greg, and I know you feel this way too, I think people are wired to do something useful,
Yes.
something helpful, something productive. And we each have a different set of skills and gifts. So my wife is the combobulator. I'm the clarity guy. And everybody's got something to contribute, something they're passionate about. And the key to actually, I think, to really finishing well is you've got to find that one or two or three things that you really love doing and that you're good at and that you could help people at, and start pouring yourself into that. And there are things that you've had to suppress for years when you were doing the full-time job and going up the career ladder that are still there. And eventually, hopefully, you get a chance to get those things out.
Do you have any advice for people over 50 on how to identify those kinds of things that they're passionate about and recover the stuff that you were very interested in years ago, even if your childhood or teens or young adult years?
I think the whole self-reflection process is really necessary for people throughout their lives. In the 20s, 30s, 40s, that reflection of trying to help you figure out what you're great at for career so that you go the right path and don't end up in a dead end somewhere that you hate. And a lot of the people I've worked with over time, over the past couple decades, are people that are stuck in their career and never had a chance to have somebody talk to them about what they're really all about. Well, I love doing that. I love helping people find out. But it turns out we have trouble. There's a saying called, you can't read the label of the jar you're in. So we have trouble seeing ourselves clearly. And we often need somebody else, a friend or a colleague or someone that we could very freely bounce ideas off of. And inevitably, who you really are and what you're all about starts to come to the surface. Is if you ask enough questions, it always comes to the surface what that person's really all about. So it's in there. And you just need to have the time. And some people just have never had a safe place or a safe person that they can talk to. And that's how they get stuck, is there's nobody they can actually brainstorm this thing. Who really am I? What do I actually really want to do? And how can I get there?
It sounds like you have done these self-reflection processes for many years. How often were you doing it? Was it like annually or just every couple of years when you started to feel that you might be getting stuck in that routine?
For me, as every strength is a weakness, I cannot stop analyzing. Okay. So I am very introspective, incredibly ridiculously introspective. So this for me is a nonstop process. It just happens. That's a curse at times because you can get very depressive. And in my case, I actually was struggling with depression my entire adult life and didn't know it until my mid-40s. And so that degree of introspection joined to the chemical imbalance was not a good mix until I finally gave in to the idea that maybe there was something not right in my brain, and I took an antidepressant and it completely changed things. I just have that makeup where I do self-reflection all the time. Where that comes in handy is that I can help other people
Mm-hmm.
analyze because I'm really good at analyzing. So I had way too much practice here, but that means I can sit down with somebody I don't know and in 15 or 20 minutes figure them out, what you're all about.
Would one of your books be able to help people get past that point of being stuck? Or was there something that you used that really worked for you?
The thing that changed me the most in my career was reading the book called Now Discover Your Strengths. And this is a well-known business book. And it was turning on its head this idea that you got to keep working on your weaknesses. And I had this obsessiveness about working on my weaknesses. It's very discouraging.
Mm-hmm.
And this book was written to say, look, you've got strengths. Let's identify them. Then there's this self-assessment still out there called StrengthsFinder. That process using StrengthsFinder was absolutely game-changing for me. Once I got a hold and could put words around my strengths, I began to really get in touch with who I was and not be embarrassed by it, not be ashamed of it, and not run from it. It was that kind of self-assessment. And there are many other personality assessments, interest assessments, in this case, strengths assessments that people can take. There are a bunch of them online that can help you get in touch with who you are. But getting clarity, and this is where that clarity word came in, getting clarity about my DNA totally transformed my direction and transformed the way I talk to people, because that's now the thing I do with other people, is help them find the key words that unlock the mystery of who they are.
I love that idea of looking for your strengths, because I too was taught that you need to address your weaknesses and work to build them up. So you have a weakness at say 30 to 40% and you want to build that up to 60. Okay, what good is that? But if you look at your strength, which is at 50, and you elevate that to 90%, it is life-changing.
What it did for me was my first professional role was in sales of medical equipment, high-tech medical equipment. I went into sales because I needed to start making money fast, and we needed to start a family. I never envisioned myself as a salesperson. I never liked sales. I went into it, and I succeeded despite the fact that I was not a traditional salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
I succeeded because I'm stubborn and smart, and I would not give up. But at one point, we hired, in one of the companies I worked for, we hired this gal. I worked 18 months to bring her on. She was the most natural salesperson I'd ever seen. She could sell anything to anybody. That warmth, that empathy, that instant. And I look back and I said, that's a salesperson. I am not a salesperson. What am I?
Mm-hmm.
And I finally realized, and this is the power of keywords, I am a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
Analyze, I figure things out. Consultant. And it was liberating to put that label on and say, that's who I am. I can't, being a salesperson was full of imposter syndrome for me. Kept trying to be what I wasn't. Once I decided I am a consultant, I'm going to be a consultant, and the only way I'm going to succeed is being a consultant, then I was free to chart a different course, which I then did. I started my own business as a consultant almost 20 years ago and continue to do so.
That keyword would be a great tool for somebody to look at in evaluating their own life and to identify things they could do as they approach 50 or over 50, even as they approach 60 or 70. It's what is
keyword.
Yeah.
The keyword exercise for me is a big, what I do with memory darts is a subset of what I do with personal branding. Personal branding is coming up with who are you? And I have several facets to that. One is a keyword exercise. And I love doing this in groups, by the way, because other people sometimes have a better understanding of your keywords than you do.
Exactly.
And you get the keywords, you get the top success stories, you get what are people are always saying about you, and you take those ingredients and you put them all together, and the picture begins to emerge of who you really are according to other people, not just you, because it's much more valid when other people are saying it about you. And that keyword exercise can lead people to break down in tears when somebody finally says, you know what you're really all about? You're really all about this. And something in you knew it, but you needed someone to put it into words. and it's liberating. And that's what I love about personal branding. And that's what I love about this work is it's liberating.
So would you be able to help somebody over 50 identify this? Would you help people
Sure.
go through that process? Okay, super.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's easier. It's actually easier with people in their 40s and 50s and 60s because we've had enough experience. We've had
Right.
enough failure. We've had enough, this worked, this didn't, this was good, this was bad. It's harder with someone in their 20s because they don't have as much of a track record.
And they're still envisioning
Yeah.
they're dreaming
Yeah.
big about what they could be if they wanted to. A lot of
Yeah.
options available. Yeah.
So it's actually easier to do it with people that are more advanced in their career and in their life.
If you had to, or had the opportunity to roll back the clock for a while, is there something that you would do differently? Or do you have any regrets in that you wish you had gone in a different direction?
Wow. Probably a whole lot. I wish I had not tried so hard to be a salesperson.
Okay.
Whatever the idea was I had in my head of a salesperson, which was completely wrong. I floundered for so long trying to become what I wasn't.
Mhm.
And it was really frustrating. Years and years of frustration and self-accusation. And I was working with a small company, and a new manager came in, and he looked at a couple of us, and he said, he saw that both of us were floundering in different areas. And he said, you know what, Steve, you ought to be doing this part. And Rob, you ought to be doing that part. And instead of each of us being half effective, we were both much more effective just because he said, you're better at that and you're better at that. Very simple, but it was huge.
Mm-hmm. Right.
For so many people, there's incredible frustration. They're trying to do things they can't do. And they just need someone to say, you know what, maybe you should be doing that. Maybe you shouldn't be doing this.
That speaks to the whole idea of coaching or getting somebody to be a consultant to help you think outside the box that you create for yourself. And the idea that this sales manager was able to identify that with you rather quickly, it just gives credibility to the idea that you can do that just by getting the right person to guide your thinking and analyze where you came from and compare it to where you want to be, and then help you plot that course to get there.
There's a radical approach I've developed over the years that I call roll your own. But it's ROLE.
Oh,
That the best thing we can do as individuals is define for ourselves the ideal role, the thing that would absolutely be the 100% sweet spot. Then we come to the market and say, here's who I am. I'm looking for this kind of role. Instead of saying, the market's going to come to me with the job titles and I got to fit into whatever that is. It sounds like a small shift, but it's actually a radical shift. You take responsibility for being who you are, and you come to the market and say, this is what I need. And that, again, helps people refer you to that kind of position. But if we have to keep conforming ourselves to somebody else's definition of the role, we're always going to compromise. We're always going to be stuck and frustrated.
mm-hmm. That's right. So again, the clarity would work to really expand your career once you identify what you're best at and what opportunities are good for you. You can start looking at that, and then everything can explode from there. But if you continue to try and conform into what people tell you are, or what you think that you should be rather than what you really are, that can be super frustrating.
Oh, yeah. And many people are stuck. They may have started out well in a job that fit well, or a company that fit well. And then they go up the ladder and realize, you know what? I don't like where I'm at, and I don't like where I'm going, and I don't like what this company is becoming. And all of a sudden, there are hard decisions that have to be made. But it's easier to make that decision if you know in your own mind who you are and where you're going. It's much easier to say, here's what I've said yes to. Now I know I can say no to everything else because I've already defined my yes. And one of the crucial parts about clarity is it gives you a very clear yes, and then it makes it so much easier to say no because I've already decided that's not me.
That's a very good point. People wanted to connect with you. How could they do that?
Easiest way to find me is at stevewoodruff.com, not surprisingly. That's my website. And there's a blog there. And then LinkedIn is where I do most of my interacting. So I've got a very strong presence on LinkedIn, a weekly newsletter. I share a lot of resources there. I know not everybody's on LinkedIn. I've tried all the different platforms, and I have a footprint on Instagram and Facebook and other places, but most of my stuff I've consolidated into LinkedIn and then onto my website. And so that's the easiest place to find me.
So people can go to your profile on LinkedIn and subscribe to your newsletter?
Yes.
What does it include?
So every week I do something. That usually includes one article that I've written on clarity and then some other recommended things, and then usually some kind of fun little surprise, some funny picture or meme or something else. And I like to send them out on the weekend because that's when you have less competition for people's eyeballs as opposed to a crowded inbox during the week.
Exactly, especially on Mondays, right? Or on Fridays when people are anxious to get into the weekend. Yeah. Super. Thank you very much, Steve, for sharing this story with us. This has been very inspirational to me on identifying ways to be more or bring more clarity into what I'm doing. And I can imagine how it would help other people, especially those who are struggling with, there has got to be more to life than what I'm living right now.
And here's the thing, Greg, as people feel ashamed of that, when they have that feeling, that sense, what am I doing? Where am I going? I should have my act together by now. I should. And there are a huge number of people asking that question. Don't be ashamed to ask that question. No, you're not supposed to have all your answers yet. And so let's get it. Let's go after it, because there's always time to say, okay, let's figure this out and see what I can do. But many people have a hard time admitting the fact that they're lost. And that's what leads to even worse frustration and despair, when in fact, there's probably some great things waiting for you to do that only you can do.
Your purpose changes multiple times over the course of your life. And it's just when you get over 50, it's the perfect opportunity. Now that you have more time, as a general rule, sometimes you have more money, you certainly have a better understanding of who you are and what your strengths are. Now is the great time to really step into that. So thank you for suggesting these great tips.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure, Greg.
That was an enlightening conversation with Steve Woodruff, the King of Clarity. If there's one takeaway from today's discussion, it's that clarity isn't just a business tool, it's a life-changing skill that helps us define who we are and communicate that with confidence. Steve's concept of memory darts is a powerful way to stand out in any setting, whether professionally, socially, or even when getting pulled over by the police, as his son humorously discovered. Beyond messaging, Steve emphasized the importance of self-reflection, especially for those of us over 50. We're finally at a stage where we can align our careers and personal pursuits with our true strengths and passions. However, Steve reminded us that getting unstuck often requires an outside perspective from someone else to help us see the label on the jar we're in. When trying to create a more meaningful life, Steve encourages people over 50 to stop fixating on improving their weaknesses. Rather, they should identify their strengths, which make them unique, and then lean into that with purpose. We also explored how Steve and his wife are navigating their empty nest years by prioritizing their relationship through intentional daily conversations. Their structured tea time and use of conversation cards are great examples of how all couples can keep relationships fresh and meaningful. If today's conversation resonated with you, be sure to connect with Steve at www.stevewoodruff.com or follow him on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can also subscribe to his free weekly newsletter on LinkedIn, where he shares insights on clarity and effective communication. That's all for this week's show. If you'd like to start living a more meaningful life, I encourage you to download our free guide to discovering your purpose, which is available at www.forwardfrom50.com. I'll have another inspirational interview on the next episode of the Forward from 50 podcast. Thank you for listening, and if you like this show, please consider leaving a review wherever you download the episodes.